New Orleans shouldn't exist. Parts of it sit 8 feet below the surrounding waterline, some even 14 feet down. A city literally lower than the lake beside it. Walk through Lakeview, and you're standing at the bottom of a bowl. Above you, unseen, Lake Pontchartrain presses against the levees, a wall of water held back by concrete and faith. But the paradox is cruel. Those same levees that keep the lake out also keep the city's rainwater in. Every storm turns New Orleans into its own trap. To survive, the city depends on an artificial heartbeat. Pumps moving 150 million gallons every 15 seconds. This isn't quiet. It's the pulse of a mechanical heart. The low, constant drone of electricity mixed with the shudder of massive turbines. Machines that have hummed, roared, and coughed for generations. They keep gravity at bay, but only barely. Every second here is a negotiation between design and disaster. Rain falls, pumps groan, water rises, and men in control rooms listen for the sound they dread most: silence. Because silence means failure. And the system holding it all together was first imagined nearly 2 centuries ago. In the early 1900s, an engineer named Baldwin would build the screw pump. Revolutionary then, aging now. His invention still beats beneath the city, pushing 21st century storms through 19th century veins. It's a miracle of engineering and a warning of fragility. Look around. Homes, schools, and jazz bars all built inside a man-made bowl, daring physics to blink first. Why would anyone live here, inside a city that must fight gravity every day just to exist? So how do you keep a city alive when the ground beneath it is disappearing? 3 inches every decade, and the water is rising to meet it? New Orleans isn't just below sea level. It's getting lower every year. Between 2002 and 2020, satellite data showed some neighborhoods sinking nearly 2 inches annually, almost 3 feet in a single generation. The earth itself is folding inward, one slow sigh at a time. But the ground isn't vanishing on its own. The very defenses that protect the city, the levees and flood walls, block the Mississippi River from spilling its silt. For centuries, that sediment rebuilt the delta, lifting it back toward the light. Now, trapped behind concrete, the land starves. The levees have saved New Orleans from floods, but they've also cut it off from the river's gift of renewal. The protection has become the cause of the slow collapse. Walk through Gentilly or the lower Ninth Ward, and you can feel it. Roads warped, door frames tilted, pipes strained beneath shifting clay. In 2010, Maria's home in Gentilly sat 4 feet above the street. Today it sits barely 2. She's lived there through the sinking, watched it happen year by year. Most don't notice, but Maria knows. Every step inside reminds her. And here, even the dead can't rest beneath the ground. The water table is so high that coffins once floated back up after storms. So the city built its cemeteries above the soil, cities of the dead. Rows of marble tombs that line the streets like miniature neighborhoods. It's a centuries-old adaptation, a visible reminder that New Orleans has always lived in negotiation with the water beneath its feet. Beneath it all hums a labyrinth, 1,600 miles of drainage pipes, each carrying the city's rainwater upward and out. That network connects to colossal pumps, some dating back over a century, still bearing Baldwin Wood's 1913 design. For many families, checking the weather isn't enough. When storms roll in, they drive past the nearest pump station just to hear its low, rhythmic growl, a mechanical heartbeat that means, for now, they're safe. The heart of New Orleans isn't Bourbon Street. It's this underground symphony, iron, rust, and willpower, still defying the water one storm at a time. But what happens when the walls meant to protect begin to fail? Not from storms, but from the ground itself giving way. For generations, that heartbeat, the hum of the pumps, the quiet confidence in the levees, felt eternal. It lulled the city into believing that the worst could be managed, that catastrophe could be engineered away. But in August 2005, the rhythm stopped. When Hurricane Katrina roared toward Louisiana, the people of New Orleans did what they always did. They trusted the walls. 60 levees surrounded them, built and maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Each a promise that the city could live below sea level and still be safe. Those promises broke one after another. It wasn't just wind or waves, it was math. A design flaw buried in paperwork and reinforced by decades of bureaucratic faith. Concrete walls built for Category 3 storms met a force that matched Category 4 surge heights, a miscalculation of just one category. But the failure wasn't just about height. Investigators later discovered the collapse was systemic. The walls of the eye walls, instead of simply being pushed over, were lifted and moved by water tunneling beneath their foundations. The peat soil, the very sinking ground we saw in Section 2, was too weak to hold the pilings. It wasn't the top of the wall that gave way. It was the foundation failing beneath the pressure, a hidden flaw that drowned the city from the inside out. When the 17th Street Canal breached, the illusion shattered. Millions of gallons, enough to fill a 10-story apartment building every second, poured into sleeping neighborhoods. Generally, Lakeview, the lower Ninth Ward, drowned not by the storm surge from the Gulf, but by the very defenses meant to protect them. While officials urged evacuation, thousands stayed, misled by comparisons to past storms, bound to neighborhoods, or without means to leave. The levee failure didn't just flood the city, it trapped people inside it. Maria's family escaped to the roof, listening to the hum that had always meant safety vanish beneath the flood. And as the sun rose over a silent city, the truth was clear. New Orleans wasn't defeated by nature. It was betrayed by belief, the belief that human precision could outthink the sea. And yet, even after all that, people came back. What kind of psyche returns to rebuild on soil that's still sinking, beneath the same repaired walls that once gave way? When the water finally receded, the map of New Orleans looked like an autopsy. Whole neighborhoods erased, street grids warped, canals carved wider by failure. But within weeks, the first cars rolled back in, not with rescue crews, but with families returning home. They came back to silence, to mold climbing the walls, to the stench of salt and decay. They came back because leaving wasn't living. Not everyone returned. Maybe a quarter never came back at all. The pull wasn't strong enough, or home no longer existed in any meaningful form. But many did, more than experts predicted, more than logic suggested. In most disasters, flight is instinct. But New Orleans runs on a different kind of gravity, cultural, emotional, ancestral. This isn't just a city. It's a story people refuse to stop telling. Every jazz funeral, every balcony draped in beads, every pot of gumbo simmering after midnight. It all becomes proof that endurance is part of the DNA. The flood didn't erase identity. It revealed how deep it ran. Maria returned, too. Her home on Genelly's sinking edge was barely standing, but she rebuilt it anyway. When asked why, she shrugged. Because it's mine. Because my grandmother's house was here. Because if I leave, the city loses one more voice. That's the quiet truth behind the comeback. Rebuilding isn't always about hope. Sometimes, it's about defiance. This defiance takes physical form in the streets. You see it in the second-line parades, a tradition where people turn mournful processions into vibrant, life-affirming celebrations. This cultural DNA, the ability to face grief and demand joy, is what fueled the rebuild. But the triumph was not absolute. While parades marched again, the economic reality was brutal. Rising costs and rebuilding hurdles meant that by 2015, over 50,000 residents, primarily low-income and black families, had been permanently displaced. The spirit survived, but the city's composition fundamentally changed. The question became, what exactly are we fighting to preserve if the people who define the culture can no longer afford to live here? There's a term psychologists use, place attachment. It's the invisible bond between memory and geography, the way streets and sounds become part of who you are. In New Orleans, that bond is almost spiritual. You can evacuate people from the flood zone, but you can't drain the soul of the bayou out of them. Would you return to a place that tried to kill you, if it still felt like the only place that ever truly knew you? By every official measure, New Orleans is safer now than it was in 2005. Stronger walls, higher gates, a $14 billion defense network built to hold back the Gulf. And yet, every calculation hides a clock. Sea level is rising 3 millimeters a year. The ground beneath the city is sinking 9. That's a 12-millimeter gap, compounded annually, eroding the very equation the engineers swore would keep them dry. The walls grow older, the city sinks lower, and the water keeps learning new ways in. By 2065, a Katrina-level storm could overtop the levees. That's not speculation, it's math. A 2025 flood modeling study by Jupiter Intelligence projected that within 40 years, the same surge that once breached a few canals could pour over the city's rim entirely, turning every street into a temporary river. Losses could quadruple. The system would hold, until it doesn't. But the threat isn't uniform. The very defenses built to protect, now create blind spots. Every new wall pushes water somewhere else. In Plaquemines, St. Bernard, the bayous where wetlands once absorbed the blow. When protection is selective, someone always inherits the risk. Out at the lake-borne barrier, the scale is biblical. 700-ton gates swing like cathedral doors, rising and falling with each storm alert. They're beautiful in a terrifying way, monuments to the belief that machinery can outthink nature. But even here, engineers admit the quiet truth. These defenses were designed for yesterday's ocean. Tomorrow's is heavier, warmer, faster. And that's the paradox. Progress feels like safety, but it's really delay. Every pump, every wall, every billion-dollar upgrade buys time, but not immunity. The city is not solving the problem. It's renting survival by the decade. Compare this to the Netherlands, where entire regions have embraced the philosophy of living with water, building floating districts and wetlands that welcome floods instead of fearing them. New Orleans, by contrast, remains committed to its massive, costly system of defiance, a city still waging war on the inevitable. The question is no longer whether the system works, but whether the strategy itself is flawed. Is it smarter to fight the sea or to learn to dance with it? Should New Orleans surrender to the sea or keep fighting it one storm at a time? 85% of properties in New Orleans will experience flooding within the next 30 years. That's not a forecast. It's a certainty baked into the land itself. The people here know this. They stay anyway. You can see it at dawn, jazz drifting from a shotgun porch, the sound carried over streets that once drowned. Children play where boats once floated. Cafes reopen in neighborhoods that took years to dry. To outsiders, it looks like denial. To locals, it's something deeper. They call a place attachment, psychology so strong it outlasts disaster. The idea that where you live can become part of who you are. Here, identity isn't something you rebuild after a storm. It's the reason you rebuild at all. A fisherman from St. Bernard Parish once said, "If I leave, I lose my stories. My ghosts don't swim." That's not defiance. That's devotion. The contrast is staggering. A city with a 90% severe flood risk that still hosts nightly parades. Mardi Gras costumes, sewn in homes, sitting below sea level. People rebuilding their foundations every decade, as if patching the past itself. Faith here isn't religious. It's architectural. It's generational. They believe the city can survive because they can't imagine a world where it doesn't. Not everyone returned. Maybe a quarter never came back, driven out by cost, by trauma, or by time. But the ones who did came back knowing. They rebuilt in full awareness that the water will return someday. And when it does, they'll lift the furniture, sandbag the doors, and start again. This is what makes New Orleans different from every other city on Earth. Here, loss and celebration exist on the same street corner, feeding the belief that the city can endure because the identity must endure. They don't live below sea level. They live above fate. 85% flood risk, 90% severe exposure. And yet, this place endures, not out of ignorance, but out of love for the impossible. Have you ever loved a place more than you feared losing it? Tell us below.